Hey there, come closer to the fire for a while, because the oldest tablets on earth preserve a strange picture. A king of the gods who ruled everything, gave authority to every throne, marked the sky with his name, and yet never came down to stand on the ground. That is the quiet trouble at the heart of Anu. Every ancient people seems to imagine the highest power arriving sooner or later. A god walks in a garden. A god speaks from a mountain. A god sends thunder over a valley, or fire over a city, or a voice through a prophet near running water. The Supreme One may be distant for a time, but eventually the story brings him close. Not Anu. The Sumerians wrote his name with the sign for sky. They placed him above the gods who shaped cities, dug canals, sent floods, whispered warnings, and walked through human affairs. They gave him the sacred number 60, the number that held the whole system together. They built high temples under the open heavens, counted the star paths, marked a crossing place in the sky called Nibiru, and still, across the tablets, across centuries of clay and kingship, Anu remains above. Honestly, I have always found that absence more unsettling than a dramatic arrival. A god who descends can be seen. A god who never descends becomes a question. Tonight we are not chasing loud fantasy. We are following clay, numbers, old star maps, empty temples, and the strange silence of a throne that seems to rule from beyond the reach of dust. If this kind of slow ancient mystery helps you settle into the night, like the video and subscribe, so we can keep walking these old roads together. Now let the room grow dim around you. Let the fire do its small work. No need to force stillness. Just listen, and let the first pieces of the old world rise from the dark. Long before paper, long before ink became the ordinary servant of memory, human hands learned to press signs into wet clay. A reed stylus, cut at an angle, met a soft tablet and left behind small, wedge-shaped marks. They look simple from far away, little cuts, little triangles, a field of quiet impressions. But those marks carried grain, debt, prayer, law, kings, stars, and the names of gods farther back than almost any written voice we have. The Sumerians did not begin by writing myths. They began, in the very human way, by keeping accounts. Sheep, barley, oil, workers, jars, fields, deliveries. It is a little funny and a little comforting that the oldest writing on earth often sounds like someone trying not to lose track of storage. Before humanity wrote down the secrets of heaven, it wrote down inventory. Even the ancient world had paperwork waiting on the table. But clay is patient. It did not remain only practical. Over centuries, the same writing system that counted sheep began to hold hymns, school lessons, God lists, lamentation, astronomical omens, and stories of how the universe was governed. What began as a tool for managing grain became a way to map the divine. And at the top of that map sat Anu. His Sumerian name was An. The sign meant sky. It meant heaven. It also became the sign placed before divine names, a marker that said, "This belongs to the world of gods." When the scribe wrote divinity, the hand first wrote the sky. That is not a small detail. It is a whole theology pressed into one sign. To write God was to look upward. Anu was not merely one god among many. He was the height of the system, the father of divine authority, the one whose status gave shape to the hierarchy beneath him. Enlil could command storms and rule the earth. Enki could dwell in the deep, fresh waters and work with cleverness, wisdom, and hidden arts. Inanna could blaze with desire, battle, beauty, and dissent. Marduk could rise in later Babylonian theology and wear names like armor, but Anu remained the summit from which legitimacy flowed. Kingship descended from heaven. That phrase appears in the Sumerian king list, on a clay prism now resting far from the river valleys where it was made. The words are simple. Kingship descended from heaven. Not the king of heaven himself. Kingship. Authority. The right to rule. The invisible weight that makes a throne more than a chair. This matters, because in the surviving record, Anu does not behave like a god eager to enter the story. He is invoked. He is named. He authorizes. His word cannot be altered. His power can be granted to others. But he does not walk into a city, sit with a human, argue by a river, or appear at a doorway with dust on his feet. He is present everywhere by structure. He is absent everywhere by movement. That is the paradox the tablets leave us. To feel it properly, we have to begin not in the sky, but in the earth, in southern Iraq, where mounds rise from flat land like sleeping backs of beasts. Beneath those mounds lie cities built, broken, rebuilt, abandoned, and covered by centuries of wind. One such mound was Nippur, a sacred city whose soil held one of the great archives of the ancient world. In the summer of 1889, John Punnett Peters stood on that mound and looked across a plain so flat it seemed almost outside time. The heat would have been patient and merciless. The land stretched outward in muted colors. Dust, baked earth, low horizon, Baliski. There were no glass cases then, no careful museum labels, no soft lights in reading rooms. Only the mound, the tools, the workers, the uncertainty, and the old city sleeping underneath. Peters was a theologian, not a seasoned field director. He came with ambition, funding, and the hope that the buried world of Mesopotamia might speak. The work was difficult. Water was scarce. Disease moved through the camp. Local tensions pressed around the excavation. The earth did not give up its dead easily, but the digging continued. Season after season, tablets came out of the soil. Not one or two. Not a little handful to place dramatically on a velvet cushion. Tens of thousands of tablets and fragments emerged from Nippur, many of them broken, many worn, many still carrying signs sharp enough to read if one had the patience and training to listen to clay. Imagine one of those tablets being lifted. It is not beautiful in the way jewels are beautiful. It is small, brown, dense, irregular, It looks almost like something the earth might have made by accident. But then you see the rows of marks, each made by a human hand thousands of years ago. A scribe once held it while the clay was damp. A reed pressed. The tablet dried. Empires rose and folded. Languages changed. Cities vanished. And the little object waited. I love that about clay. Paper burns. Memory falters. Stone can be broken, but fired clay can sleep through catastrophe with the stubbornness of a village elder who refuses to leave the doorway. Before the tablets could speak, however, scholars had to learn their language. Cuneiform was not one language. It was a writing system used for many. Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, and others all passed through its wedge-shaped doorway. The decipherment took decades. It was not a clean miracle, but a slow, human labor, full of errors, rivalries, insights, and brave people climbing dangerous cliffs to copy inscriptions. One of the great keys was the Behistun inscription in western Iran, carved high into a cliff by the Persian king Darius I. It preserved the same royal message in 3 scripts: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. By comparing what could be known with what was still dark, scholars opened one lock, then another. Old Persian helped Babylonian speak. Babylonian helped later readers approach the older Sumerian tradition. Sumerian was especially strange. It did not belong to the same family as Hebrew, Arabic, or Akkadian. It did not fit neatly into familiar patterns. Its grammar moved differently. Its words had no living cousins waiting nearby to help. For a time, some scholars even wondered if Sumerian was not a real spoken language at all, but some kind of priestly code. The tablets settled that doubt with quiet force. School texts, copying exercises, word lists, grammatical lists, and bilingual explanations showed that Sumerian had been learned, taught, spoken, written, and preserved. The scribes themselves left us their classrooms. You can almost see the young student leaning over damp clay, copying signs again and again, while an older teacher mutters corrections. The hand slips. The line is ugly. The master sighs. Somewhere in deep time, a child is bored during writing practice, and because of that boredom, we can now reconstruct a dead language. History has a sense of humor, even when it is covered in dust. Among the most important school tools were lexical lists. The Sumerians loved lists. Plants, animals, stones, tools, stars, cities, profession, gos. They arranged reality into columns, as if the world could be made safer by naming it in order. And among those lists, the god lists are especially important. The greatest of them is known by its opening words, Aniqualsanum. It places the Sumerian name and the Akkadian name of the sky god side by side. The list runs through thousands of divine names in its complete tradition, arranged by rank, family, function, and identity. It is not a casual list. It is a divine census, a map of heaven as an administration. And it begins with Anu. It always begins with Anu. That repeated beginning matters. Across the scribal tradition, across cities and centuries, the highest place belongs to him. The entire divine world is organized from his name downward. Yet once the myths begin to move, once action enters the story, Anu Rechedes, the gods beneath him speak louder. They struggle, desire, descend, build, flood, rescue, and scheme. Anu remains the summit, but not the traveler. That is why his absence is not emptiness. It is structure. A mountain does not need to walk down into the valley to determine the shape of the rivers. A number at the base of a system does not need to appear in every calculation to govern the whole. A king can be unseen and still have every seal stamped in his name. Still, the question remains: why would the oldest written theology place its highest God so far above the story that he almost never enters it? Why build temples to a God who does not arrive? Why assign him the number of totality, the sky sign, the fatherhood of gods, the authority behind kings, and then keep him away from earth? The answer begins in the way the Sumerians imagined the universe itself. Not as empty space, not as a vague above and below, but as a governed order, with realms, jurisdictions, and boundaries. The cosmos, for them, had something like administration. The heavens had paths. The earth had rulers. The deep waters had their lord. Everything belonged somewhere. And Anu belonged to the sky. But not just any sky. The middle road. The crossing road. The place where the stars and planets marked the boundary between above and below. The room is quieter now. The fire has lowered a little. The tablets on the table seem to darken at their edges. Nippur sinks back under its mound. The classroom of young scribes fades into night. Ahead, the story lifts its eyes from clay to the sky, where the ancient astronomers drew 3 paths across darkness and placed Anu not on earth, not in a city, not in a temple chamber, but at the crossing where heaven holds itself apart. The sky that held Anu was not a vague ceiling. The Sumerians and later Babylonian scribes did not look upward and see only blue by day, black by night, and mystery in between. They watched the heavens with the patience of farmers, priests, and accountants all at once. They counted risings. They noticed paths. They recorded when a star appeared, where a planet stood, how the moon behaved, and what the sky seemed to say before kings marched or rivers failed. Their astronomy was not separate from religion. Their religion was not separate from administration. The same mind that counted barley also counted stars. That is why Anu distance has to be understood through order. One of the clearest old stories of cosmic order is the Atrahasis epic. It does not begin with nothing. It begins with a world already present, already divided, already busy. The gods are working. They dig. They bear burdens. They complain, as workers in every age have complained, which again makes the divine world feel almost wonderfully human. Evengods, it seems, did not enjoy endless labor. In that story, the cosmos is divided by lot. Anu goes up to the sky. Enlil takes the earth and its people. Enki receives the Abzu, the deep, fresh waters beneath the land. 3 great gods, 3 realms, 3 jurisdictions. That word, jurisdictions, may sound dry at first, but it is useful. The ancient Mesopotamian city was a place of offices, duties, storehouses, boundaries, and ranks. Someone controlled grain. Someone managed canals. Someone decided labor. Someone carried messages. Someone sealed tablets. A city survived because responsibilities were placed in order. The Sumerian cosmos mirrors that world. Heaven, earth, and deep water are not floating poetic ideas. They are domains with rulers. Anu receives the sky by lot. That detail is strange if we pause over it. If Anu simply is the sky in a plain, natural sense, why should the sky be assigned to him? Why should a lot be cast? The source asks us to notice the administrative feeling of the scene. A realm is granted. A role is distributed. Anu goes upward because the cosmic order places him there. Did he stay there because he had to? Did he stay there because he chose to? Or did the distinction matter less to the scribes than the result, that Anu remained above, and the work of earth belonged to others? The tablets do not answer quickly. They prefer structure. Later astronomical traditions divide the sky into 3 paths. The path of Enlil lies in the northern sky. The path of Enki lies in the southern sky. The path of Anu lies between them, the central band, the equatorial road, the region through which the sun, moon, and visible planets travel in their cycles. If you were standing with me on a flat roof in ancient Mesopotamia, the night air would feel cooler after the heat of the day. Below us, the city would settle. Dogs would bark once and then fall silent. Somewhere a door would close. The river would breathe in the distance, slow and dark, carrying silt and moonlight through the land. Above us, the sky would not be empty. It would be a tablet of fire. A scribe might point north, to stars that circle and never fully leave. He might point south, to stars near the horizon, close to the imagined waters below. Then he might lift his hand to the middle road, where the wandering lights move, where planets cross the heavens, where balance is measured, where the sky seems to divide itself. That is the path of Anu. Not the nearest place, not the loudest place, the middle crossing. There is something very beautiful about that. Anu does not sit at the edge of the world. He sits at the line that allows the world to be read. The boundary, the balance, the midpoint, the place where above and below are held apart and related at the same time. The source connects this to Nibiru. We have to be careful with that word, because it has wandered very far in modern imagination. Many people have heard Nibiru described as a hidden planet, a wandering world, a returning home of the Anunnaki. Those ideas are modern. They are vivid, and they have their own strange storytelling power. But the cuneiform evidence described in the source points somewhere else. Nibiru means crossing place. a ford, a ferry, a point where one passes from one side to another. The word can appear in practical contexts, not only cosmic ones. A river crossing, a place where a person or army moves through. It is not originally a planet name in the modern sense. It is a threshold word. In astronomical texts, Nibiru is associated with a celestial body or marker at a crossing. Often, it is connected with Marduk and Jupiter, especially when Jupiter stands in a position that divides the sky. Some texts complicate the identification. Scholars debate details, and we should let them. But the common idea remains. Nibiru is not simply a wandering object. It is a marker of division, a holder of the crossing place of heaven and earth, a threshold in the sky. Now imagine the ancient scribe again. He watches a bright planet approach the meridian, that great invisible line where the sky seems to stand balanced between east and west. He knows the star paths. He knows the months. He knows the old names. He presses the sign into clay and writes of the crossing. Not because he imagines a wandering world rolling in from darkness, but because the sky itself has a place where movement becomes measure. That place belongs to Anu. This is what makes the question so deep. Anu is not merely far away. He is placed at the boundary. He occupies the position that regulates relation. He is above earth, yet his path is the place through which heavenly order is read from earth. He is not absent like something lost. He is absent like a locked door is absent from the room it protects. You do not step through it casually, but its existence shapes every movement near it. The same idea appears in architecture. Now let the sky lower itself into mud brick. We travel to Uruk, one of the earliest great cities of the world, a place whose name still carries the weight of beginnings. In the 4th millennium before the Common Era, Uruk was vast by the standards of its age. Its walls, temples, workshops, courtyards, storehouses, and crowded life made it one of humanity's first, true urban wonders. At the center stood 2 great religious zones. One was the Eanna precinct, the House of Heaven, later closely associated with Inanna. The other was the Anu Ziggurat, a raised platform that lifted worship toward the sky. At its summit stood what archaeologists call the White Temple. Pause there. A white temple on a high platform in a flat land. Try to see it in the early morning. The plain is still cool. Dust lies pale around the base. The city has not fully woken. A priest begins the climb, sandals pressing into steps worn by other feet, robe brushing mud brick, breath slow. Above him the temple catches light before the streets do. Its plastered walls glow, not with gold, not with gemstone, with whiteness, with height, with the simple force of a building made to be seen from far away. Inside, the plan is controlled, ordered, deliberate. A sanctuary within a sanctuary. A central room. Side chambers. A raised platform where a cult statue might have stood. But no identified statue of Anu was found there. That absence may be due to time, damage, loss, excavation limits, or the ordinary accidents that haunt archaeology. We should not pretend absence in the ground proves absence in every moment of ancient use. Still, the source lingers over it because it matches the textual pattern so well. The highest temple for the highest sky god, and no surviving body of the god at its center. Architecture of absence. A house built toward one who does not arrive. The symbol of Anu deepens the feeling. In later Mesopotamian iconography, his presence can be represented not by a human-like figure, but by a horned crown resting on a throne. The horned crown marks divinity. The throne marks kingship. But the figure is missing. A crown without a head. A throne without a seated body. Sovereignty without appearance. I have always found that image quietly powerful. It is not empty like a forgotten chair. It is empty like a reserved place no one dares to occupy. The absence is active. It commands the room. The Iana precinct adds another layer. Its name means House of Heaven, and later texts remember it as connected with Anu. Yet in practice, it becomes the great temple of Inanna. Some traditions describe Anu granting it to his daughter, as if the king of the sky gives away his earthly house and remains where he has always been. The House of Heaven stands on earth, but heaven itself does not move in. That is almost tender and a little lonely. Imagine a palace built for a father who never visits, then filled by the daughter who does. Festivals gather around her. Hymns rise to her. Offerings pass through her courts. The old name remains, House of Heaven, but the absent father stays above. The city lives with a vacancy at its highest point. This vacancy is not failure. It is the message. The same pattern appears in the numbers. The Mesopotamian system of counting was based on 60. We still live inside its echo every day. 60 seconds in a minute. 60 minutes in an hour. 360 degrees in a circle. Long after Sumerian ceased to be spoken, long after the temples fell into mounds, their counting still touches the clock on the wall and the circle on the page. In the divine number system, Anu receives 60. Enlil receives 50. Enki receives 40. Nunna, the moon god, receives 30. Utu, the sun god, receives 20. Inanna receives 15. The numbers are not random decorations. They express rank, relation, and cosmic role. Anu as 60 is not merely first in a line. 60 is the base, the whole cycle, the completion after which counting begins again. It contains the system. It is the measure that allows other measures to exist. If Enlil at 50 can command the earth, and Enki at 40 can work in the deep waters, Anu at 60 is something wider, the whole within which the others take their places. To descend into one of the smaller roles would be, in this symbolic logic, to become less than the base. The source suggests that this may be one reason Anu does not act like the others. He is not one force moving within the world. He is the condition from which their authority is counted. That may sound abstract, but the ancient scribes made abstraction feel physical. They pressed it into clay. They placed it in god lists. They used it in royal theology. In technical contexts, Anu could be written with the divine sign followed by the number 60. Not a face, not a body, a sign and a number. The god as a total, the sky as arithmetic, the throne as a completed circle. This is where kingship enters again. The Sumerian king list says kingship descended from heaven. The phrase is famous because it sounds like a door opening above the world. But if we listen closely, the one who descends is not Anu. It is kingship. Authority travels downward while the source remains in place. That is delegated sovereignty. The king on earth rules because something from above legitimizes him. The gods below act because something higher authorizes their order. The divine word flows, but the divine king does not walk. This is different from many later religious stories, where the highest god speaks directly to humans, appears in fire, judges, journeys, or enters history as a character. Anu is not usually a character in that sense. He is more like the quiet law that allows characters to exist. The play moves because the stage stands. The actors speak because the space holds them. That kind of god is difficult to tell stories about. A storm god is dramatic. A love and war goddess is dramatic. A clever water god who saves humanity by whispering through a reed wall is wonderfully dramatic. But the god who sits at the crossing point, whose number is 60, whose word cannot be changed, whose presence is a vacant throne, resists drama. So the stories happen below him. Enlil decides. Enki intervenes. Inanna descends. Marduk battles. Kings receive rule. Scribes write the formula. Priests climb the temple. Stars cross the path. Anu remains. And because he remains, everything else can move. Some scholars would say this is simply the logic of sky religion. Anu is remote because the sky is remote. That is a strong reading. It is clean, cautious, and probably close to how many academic discussions begin. Yet the source asks whether the pattern is too consistent, too carefully distributed through text, number, architecture, and astronomy, to be only a poetic way of saying the sky is high. Maybe it is theology. Maybe it is philosophy before philosophy had such a name. Maybe it is memory. We are not choosing yet. For now, we are only placing the pieces in the lamplight. A sign that means sky and God. A list that always begins with Anu. A cosmic division where he takes the heavens. A middle path in the sky that bears his name. A crossing point called Nibiru. A white temple without his surviving image. A horned crown on an empty throne. A sacred number that means completion. A phrase saying kingship descended, while the king remained above. The fire beside us shifts. A small coal breaks inward and glows red. Outside, night presses its face to the window. In the old world, a scribe sets down his stylus and looks up. Jupiter, or some bright crossing star, stands in the middle road. The city below is full of breath. Wheels, animals, prayers, sleepers, and kings who will one day be dust. Above them all is Anu path. The crossing holds. The king does not come down. But there is one story in which Anu is asked to do more than authorize. One moment when the old Sky King is sent toward chaos itself, toward the deep hostile waters of Tiamat. He goes out. Hesseus. He falls silent. And then, strangely, he turns back. The old story of Tiamat begins in darkness, older than cities. Not darkness as a room without a lamp, but the first deep, the place before order has learned its own name. In the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, the world is not yet the world as humans know it. The waters are alive with divine memory. Apsu, the fresh water, and Tiamat, the salt water, mingle at the beginning of things. From them come younger gods, restless gods, noisy hots, gods with movement in them. Even before humans exist, the old pattern is there. The younger powers disturb the older deep. I always find that strangely familiar. Every house has known it in a tiny way. The elder trying to rest, the young ones making too much noise in the next room. Only here, the next room is the universe, and the noise is creation itself beginning to wake. Tiamat is not first presented as a simple monster. That would be too easy. She is older than the gods who fear her. She is mother, depth, salt water, origin, and chaos together. She is the kind of being that cannot be reduced to an enemy without losing something true. Yet in the epic, she turns hostile. The younger gods are afraid. The divine assembly trembles. They need a champion, and the first champion sent is Anu. Pause there, softly. This is the moment that matters. The king of the gods, the one whose number is 60, the one whose name is Sky, the one whose authority sits above every throne, is sent toward the oldest danger in the story. If Anu were a warrior god in the usual sense, this would be his hour. The music would rise. The doors of heaven would open. The Sky King would descend in brilliance, strike the waters, and order would be restored by his hand. But that is not what happens. Anu goes out. He perceives Tiamat. He falls silent. He turns back. The text does not give us a long speech. It does not let him explain himself in the careful way later readers might wish. There is no confession, no thunderous refusal, no dramatic wound. Only approach, perception, silence, withdrawal. That sequence has a cold beauty. He sees what is before him, and he does not continue. Some traditions and translations make the retreat sound shameful, and the epic certainly uses it to prepare the rise of Marduk. Scholars often read the scene as part of Babylonian religious politics. Marduk, the city god of Babylon, must become supreme. For him to rise, older gods must fail or step aside. Anu and Enlil cannot solve the crisis. Marduk-chan. Babylon becomes the center. The theology serves the city. That reading is strong. It has history behind it. It has politics behind it. Ancient stories do not float free from power. Babylon wanted Marduk enthroned over the divine world, and the Enuma Elish gives that desire a cosmic stage. Still, the source asks us to listen to Anu retreat more carefully. He does not fight and lose. He does not strike and fall. He does not have his weapon broken. He says, and becomes silent. That is different. There are silences that mean fear. There are silences that mean calculation. There are silences that mean a boundary has been recognized. A person standing at the edge of a frozen river may be afraid. Yes, but he may also know that stepping forward would not be courage. It would be ruin wearing a brave face. What if Anu turns back because direct engagement is not his function? What if the king whose power holds the structure cannot enter the chaos without breaking the structure he sustains? It is only a possibility. We cannot be sure. The tablet does not whisper the full reason into our ear, but the possibility fits the wider pattern. Anu is not the god of dramatic intervention. He is not the one who digs canals, whispers through reed walls, descends through gates, or wrestles monsters in the center of the poem. He is the source from which authority flows. A source does not always leave its spring. A foundation does not climb into the house. A number that contains the system does not become one of the smaller numbers inside it. So Anu withdraws, and the assembly remains afraid. Then Marduk steps forward. Marduk is young in the structure of the myth, but full of force. He is storm, weapon, voice, confidence, and ambition. He offers to face Tiamat, but he asks a price. If he succeeds, the gods must grant him supreme authority. His word must be unalterable. His command must stand like that of Anu. That comparison is revealing. Marduk does not ask merely for strength. He asks for the quality of Anu authority, the word that cannot be changed, the power that makes command real. The younger god can fight, but he needs the older Sky King's standard to make his victory permanent. The assembly agrees. Authority descends, not Anu himself. Authority. This is the same pattern again, now in mythic battle form. Anu remains the measure. Another god acts with power derived from that measure. The world is changed through delegation. Now imagine the scene slowly. The divine council gathered in a trembling hush. The old waters beyond the boundary stirring like a sea under no moon. Gods who once seemed powerful are suddenly small before the mother deep. Anu has returned, quiet, unreactably. Perhaps his silence weighs more heavily than any defeat would have. No one wants to ask what he saw. No one wants to know exactly why he came back. Marduk stands in the assembly. The gods test him. They place a garment before him and ask him to destroy it by his word, then restore it by his word. He speaks, and the garment vanishes. He speaks again, and it returns. That small test matters because it is not only about force. It is about command becoming reality. A word that can unmake and remake. When Marduk is accepted, the story becomes more violent in its imagery, but we will keep our lamp low. He goes out against Tiamat. Winds become weapons. A net is spread. The old chaos is overcome. From her body, the ordered world is fashioned. Heaven and earth are arranged. Stations are fixed. The stars take their places. Time becomes readable. The calendar becomes possible. Creation, in this epic, is made from the conquered deep. And Anu. Anu is not the builder. Anu is not the slayer. Anu is the benchmark to which the slayer is compared. Your command shall be like Anu command. That is the sentence that matters. His presence is not in the blow. It is in the legitimacy of command. Marduk wins the story, but Anu remains the standard by which victory becomes kingship. This is why the source keeps returning to absence. Absence can be weak, or absence can be structural. There is a chair at the head of certain tables that changes the room even when no one sits in it. There is a sealed door in a temple that makes every step quieter. There is a name at the top of a list that orders every name below it without needing to move. Anu absence feels like that. Not empty, but governing. The Enuma Elish gives us one of the few moments where Anu almost becomes a character in action. He approaches the edge of chaos. And then the story refuses to make him the hero. Instead, his withdrawal makes space for the delegated hero. That is the architecture of the whole system in miniature. The highest God does not descend to solve the crisis. He allows authority to pass downward. He remains above. The younger power acts. The world is ordered. If you were hearing this beside an old Babylonian temple wall, perhaps during a festival when the epic was recited, you might not hear Anu as cowardly. You might hear him as remote, too high, too foundational, almost too dangerous to move directly. The king who rules by being the source cannot become the soldier who enters the mud. There is something both grand and lonely in that. Imagine being the highest power and never being the one who touches the earth. Every king below uses your authority. Every god below measures himself against your word. Yet the stories people love belong to others. Enki gets the clever rescue. Inanna gets the descent. Marduk gets the battle. Enlil gets the storm and the flood. Anu gets the throne. A throne can be glorious, but it can also be still. That stillness is the darker truth of this story. Not darkness of blood or screams, but the darker quiet of supreme distance. A king so high that he can never safely arrive. A father whose children act in his name while his own face remains above the world. A sky that governs everything and touches nothing. The Sumerian and Akkadian texts return to this again and again in softer administrative form. Royal inscriptions call on Anu. Kings say Anu and Enlil have chosen them, called them, made them great. Prayers rise toward him, but they rise as one sends words across a long distance. The language is reverent, but it is not intimate in the same way local devotion can be intimate. A farmer may know the canal god because water reaches his field. A mother may know the healing goddess because a fever breaks. A king may invoke Anu because his rule needs heaven above it. Different kinds of nearness. Different kinds of power. Anu is the kind that does not need to be near. The concept of the Anu power, often called the Antu in Akkadian contexts, helps explain this. It is the quality of supreme authority that belongs originally to Anu and can be conferred upon others. Marduk can receive it. Enlil can hold it. Kingship can descend through it. But the source remains Anu. A flame can light many lamps without leaving its own place. A seal can authorize many tablets without becoming the clay. A voice can command through messengers, while the speaker remains behind a curtain. The curtain, in Anunnaki, is the sky, and perhaps also Nibiru, the crossing point. That word waits for us now, because it has been covered in so much modern noise that the old quiet meaning can be hard to hear. Nibiru has been imagined as a planet, a returning world, a home of gods moving through deep space. The source asks us to set those pictures aside for a time and return to the tablets. Return to the word itself. Return to the ford, the crossing, the marker in the sky where one region becomes another. The Enuma Elish has shown us Anu at the boundary of action, seeing chaos and withdrawing. Now the astronomical texts will show us Anu at the boundary of heaven, where the paths cross and the worlds are held apart. So let the divine counsel fade. Let Tiamat waters grow still in the dark behind us. Let Marduk victory become a distant festival chant. Above the temples, above the scribal schools, above the river glinting like black oil under moonlight, the middle road of the sky waits. Somewhere along that road is Nibiru, not a simple planet in the popular tale, but a crossing place, a threshold, a point of division. And if Anu never came down, perhaps it is because his throne was not a place to travel from. Perhaps it was the line that travel could not cross. Nibiru is a word that needs a quiet room. It has been shouted about for many years, pulled into modern legends, dressed in the colors of lost planets, returning worlds, hidden orbits, and secret histories. Those stories are vivid, and people are drawn to vivid things. A wandering planet makes a dramatic shadow. A hidden home of the gods feels like a door into forbidden astronomy. It is easy to understand why such ideas catch fire, but the clay is calmer. The cuneiform evidence, as the source follows it, asks us to slow down and begin with the word itself. Nibiru means crossing place, a ford, a passage, a ferry point, a place where one goes from one side to another. It can be used for something as ordinary as a river crossing, where feet, carts, animals, soldiers, and merchants move through water at the narrow or shallow place. That ordinary meaning is important. Ancient words often carry their cosmic meanings upward from common life. A crossing in the sky can be imagined because people know crossings on Earth. They know the anxiety of stepping into a ford at dusk. They know the mud pulling at sandals, the water pressing at the legs, the animal hesitating before the current. They know that a crossing is not just a location. It is a risk. It is a permission. It is the place where one realm becomes another. So when the astronomical texts speak of Nibiru, the root image is not a mysterious planet rolling through darkness. It is a threshold, a crossing, a place that divides and connects. In several key texts, Nibiru appears with the marker for a star or celestial body. It is linked with Marduk in his heavenly form, and often identified with Jupiter, especially when Jupiter stands in a position that seems to divide the sky. Some texts are more complicated. At times, other bodies may carry the title in certain positions. That can feel confusing if we expect Nibiru to be one fixed object with one modern identity. But if Nibiru is a function, a crossing role, the confusion softens. The thing is called Nibiru when it holds the crossing. That is the heart of it. The sky was not merely above the Sumerians. It was organized. They saw northern stars, southern stars, and the central path between them. The central path, the path of Anu, was the road of balance and division. The sun, moon, and planets moved in and through that region. It was the sky road where order could be watched. Now imagine a clear Mesopotamian night. No city glare, no electric hum, only the low murmur of people settling indoors, the breath of animals, the dark shape of date palms, the river moving somewhere beyond the walls. A scribe stands on a roof with a tablet, perhaps not writing yet, simply watching. His eyes have learned patience. He does not glance at the sky the way we often do, quickly, distractedly, before returning to our bright little devices. He watches as one watches a king approach a gate. Jupiter rise. Slowly, night after night, its place changes. It becomes a wanderer and a marker at once. When it reaches the central place, when it divides the sky, when it stands in the path of Anu, it becomes more than a bright point. It becomes a sign of crossing. It holds the heavenly ford. The texts say Nibiru holds the crossing place of heaven and earth. That phrase is too beautiful to rush. Not the house of a rogue planet. Not a simple address. The crossing place of heaven and earth. A boundary held in order. A point where above and below are related, but not freely mixed. The line is marked so that the worlds do not collapse into one another. The stars keep their courses. The gods keep their jurisdictions. The earth remains earth. The sky remains sky. The crossing is known, but controlled. This returns us to Anu. Anu path is the middle band. Nibiru belongs to that logic of the middle, the division, the regulated crossing. If Anu sits at the sky road where balance is measured, then Nibiru is like the signpost at his threshold. It says, here is the ford. Here is the place of passage. Here is where heaven and earth face one another without becoming the same. The source stresses this because popular retellings often turn Nibiru into a place from which Anu might travel. But the tablets, read carefully, suggest something subtler. Nibiru is not the palace down the road. It is the crossing point. It is not primarily a vehicle of arrival. It is the marker of distance, relation, and control. Anu never descends from Nibiru to earth because, in this reading, Nibiru is not a home to leave. It is the boundary he holds. The old Sky King is placed at the threshold, and the threshold is precisely what must remain stable. That idea changes the feeling of everything. This is why Anu absence begins to feel less like neglect and more like function. He stays away because his staying away is part of what keeps the order intact. But the source asks a second question beside it. What if the Sumerian scribes were not merely making poetry from the sky? What if they were describing a structure of authority, a system in which the highest king remains at the crossing, delegates power downward, and never enters the lower realm directly because direct entry would disturb the whole order? That question does not need to be answered tonight. It only needs to be heard. The same pattern appears again when we return to Uruk, but now much later, in the fading centuries of the old Mesopotamian world. For most of Mesopotamian history, Anu is immense in theology and restrained in daily cult. His name is everywhere in authority, but other gods receive the warmer, busier devotion of city life. Inanna fills temple courts with her fierce presence. Enki receives hymns of wisdom. Enlil holds the old power of command. Marduk rises in Babylon with political and cosmic force. Anu remains high, invoked, honored, and distant. Then, in the late period, something changes. Under foreign empires, after the old balances have shifted, Uruk experiences a revival centered on Anu and his consort Antu. A new temple complex is built. Rituals are composed and preserved. Priests organize festivals. The old city, ancient even to the ancients, turns again toward the sky, Father. And in these late ritual texts, Anu's statue is carried in procession through the streets. There it is, the almost heartbreaking detail. After thousands of years in which the highest God is known mostly through absence, delegation, number, and sky, an image of him finally walks the city. Not Anu himself in the simple sense. A cult statue, an image prepared through ritual, washed, opened, awakened, according to Mesopotamian sacred practice, so that divine presence might dwell in it. Still, the source hears sadness in it, because the timing matters. This is not the early age of Uruk rising bright from mud brick beginnings. This is not the first building of the White Temple. This is a late world, a world under pressure, a world touched by Alexander, Hellenistic power, changing institutions, and the long decline of the cuneiform tradition. The scribes still write, but the old universe is beginning to narrow. The tablets continue, but the silence around them grows. If you had spent 3,000 years saying the king was in the sky, and then your own world began to break apart, perhaps you too would carry his image through the streets. Not because the king had finally come down, because you needed to show that he had not vanished. Picture the procession. The absent king is visible for a while. A clay or wooden or precious image, washed and awakened, passes through the city that had always claimed the sky. Above it, the real sky remains unreachable. The path of Anu is still overhead. The crossing point is still not crossed by the god himself. That is why the image is so moving. It is both presence and confession of absence. A crown placed before the people because the wearer remains beyond them. This late revival does not erase the ancient pattern. It reveals how strongly the pattern was felt. When the old order trembled, the priests did not discover a story of Anu walking among humans. They made a ritual body for him. They carried an image through the streets, as if to repair the distance for one festival cycle, one sacred day, one fragile year. Then the image returned to the temple. The sky remained the sky. The god remained above. In the god lists, this same stillness is preserved with almost bureaucratic beauty. Anu epithets are often positional and relational. Father, Great Lord, King of the gods, Lord of the pure heavens. These titles tell us where he stands in relation to the whole. They do not tell many stories of what he does with his hands. Enlil has wind, command, flood, and destiny. Enki has deep water, clever speech, spells, wisdom, and rescue. Inanna has descent, battle, beauty, fury, and return. Anu has status. Anu has sourcehood. Anu has the silence of the highest name. The more one listens, the more the silence becomes the message. The god list does not need to narrate him. It needs to place him. Once placed, he orders what follows. Like the first mark on a measuring cord, like north on a map, like the center of a circle. It does not move around to prove itself. Everything else is measured from it. That is the Anu mystery in its deepest form. He is too important to be busy. It sounds almost humorous, and maybe a little true. The lesser gods have schedules, problems, journeys, arguments, dramatic entrances. Anu, at the top, has the terrible luxury of stillness, or perhaps the terrible burden of it. Because to remain the whole, he cannot become one part. To remain the crossing, he cannot cross. To remain the source, he cannot spend himself as one more stream. And when placed together, they form a shape. Anu in the sky. Anu as 60. Anu as the source of kingship. Anu as the empty throne. Anu as the father at the top of the list. Anu as the god who approaches chaos and falls silent. Anu as the one whose authority can be carried by others. Anu as the king whose statue finally walks only when the old world is fading. Now the fire beside us has settled into deeper red. The room is warm, but the story has moved very far upward, to the place where the middle sky divides itself. There, Nibiru is no longer a dramatic rumor, but a quiet crossing, a ford in heaven, a threshold marked by star and number. Below it, cities rise and fall. Nippur is dug from the soil. Uruk glows white, then crumbles into mound. Kings claim heaven, then become names on prisms. Scribes copy god lists, then disappear. And above them all, Anu remains where the tablets place him. Not arriving, not absent in the careless sense, holding the distance. The last question is no longer only why he never came down. It is what kind of universe requires its highest king to stay away. The universe that keeps Anu away is not empty. It is full of messengers. Psalm daughters, workers, scribes, kings, storms, rivers, omens, and delegated hands. This is the part that makes the old system feel less like a lonely sky and more like a palace whose highest chamber is never opened, while every corridor below it stays busy with footsteps. Anu does not need to descend because the world beneath him is crowded with those who carry pieces of his authority. That is the pattern the source keeps finding. In the Sumerian and Akkadian imagination, power moves downward like water from a high canal. It begins above, invisible at first, then appears in channels, gates, fields, and jars. By the time a farmer drinks it, he may not see the distant source, but the source is still inside the water. Kingship works that way. Divine command works that way. The word of Anu works that way. The Sumerian king list begins with the phrase that kingship descended from heaven. It does not say that Anu descended. It does not say that the king of the gods walked into a city square and placed a crown on a human head while the crowd watched with open mouths. It says kingship descended. The office came down. The power came down. The right to rule arrived from above. That distinction is small, but small hinges hold heavy doors. Imagine the clay prism in a museum tray. It is four-sided, narrow, and covered in columns. It does not shine. It does not try to impress like gold. Its power is quieter. A hand turns it carefully under museum light, and each face carries the memory of rulers, cities, impossible spans of time, dynasties rising and falling like breath. The first line does not begin with a human boast. It begins with heaven. Kingship descended from heaven. That phrase is like a rope hanging from the sky, but the one who holds the rope above remains unseen. In this system, the human king is never only human. He is a receiver. He does not invent legitimacy from his own body. It comes down to him. He wears a crown, commands workers, builds temples, judges disputes, leads armies, and stamps his name into clay. But behind all of that is the old claim that authority has arrived from a higher realm. And above that higher realm stands Anu, not as the busy manager of every field, but as the source from which the idea of rule itself is possible. This is why royal inscriptions invoke him again and again. A king may say Anu and Enlil called him to greatness. He may say the great gods granted his reign. He may build temples and offer sacrifices and repeat the names that make power feel ancient enough to be trusted. But the text does not usually imagine Anu appearing in person to chat with the king like a neighbor leaning over a garden wall. Enlil can be close to kings because Enlil governs the earth and its breath. Enki can be close to humans because his wisdom moves through water, craft, and hidden speech. Inanna can be close because desire, battle, and beauty are never far from the human pulse. Anu remains far because his function is not one event. It is the framework of all events. This makes his fatherhood unusual. In the god lists, Anu is father of gods. Some traditions surround him with vast divine family lines. His children and descendants fill the active world. They are the ones who move. They descend. They quarrel. They rescue. They seduce. They strike. They build. They listen to prayers and named cities. They receive bread, beer, incense, song, and complaint. Anu is the Father whose house is everywhere, and whose room is still closed. This is not neglect in the ordinary sense. It is distance as design. The Source asks us to imagine the Anunnaki within that design. The name is often understood as the offspring or princely seed of Anu, though the details of etymology and usage shift across periods. In the broad mythic logic, they are the divine working tier, the great gods who operate within the world, while the highest king remains above it. They are not merely servants. They are extensions of celestial order into practical reality. In mythic terms, the divine administration works through levels. Enlil on force. Enki advises and subverts when mercy requires cleverness. Inanna descends and returns. Nana marks the moon. Utu watches with solar clarity. Marduk, in later Babylonian theology, receives elevated authority and becomes the champion who acts where older gods do not. Each god has a zone of nearness, a way of touching human life. Anu gives the frame. That frame appears again in the idea of the unalterable word. A command becomes law, not because it is loud, but because it is backed by the Source. When Marduk is acclaimed in the Enuma Elish, his command is compared to that of Anu. His word is made like Anu word. This is not merely a compliment. It is a transfer of the quality that makes speech binding. A spoken word could bless. It could curse. It could name. It could assign fate. To speak with divine authority was to press reality into a new arrangement. The reed stylus leaves wedges in clay. The divine word leaves order in the world. There is a calm terror in that. A God who hurls lightning is frightening in one way. A God whose word cannot be altered is frightening in another. Lightning passes. A word remains. It becomes rule, border, genealogy, template, tax, omen, throne. It enters the paperwork of existence. That is why his absence from direct action is so consistent. If he entered every story as a moving character, the system would lose its vertical shape. The summit would become a traveler on the road. The sky would become one more district. 60 would become another number among numbers. Instead, Anu stays high, and his authority travels through signs. The late priests of Uruk seem to have felt the weight of this absence. By the Seleucid period, when Greek power and old Mesopotamian traditions lived uneasily together, Uruk revived Anu worship with intensity. Ritual texts describe his cult, his consort Antu, his festival cycle, his image moving through the city. The old absent king was made visible in a way that earlier centuries had not emphasized. But even this visibility proves the distance. A cult statue is not a casual statue in Mesopotamian religion. It is not simply a reminder, not a decorative figure standing politely in a shrine. Through rituals of washing and opening the mouth, the image becomes a dwelling place for divine presence. The god can inhabit it. The image can eat offerings, receive clothing. hear hymns, and travel in procession as a real sacred body. So when Anu's statue is carried, the ritual is serious. Yet the source hears in it a final melancholy. For centuries, the highest god had been represented by sky, number, and vacant sovereignty. Then, as the old cuneiform world was weakening, his image walked. Perhaps the priests needed him nearer because the world felt less secure. Perhaps carrying the image through the streets was a way of saying, "The king is still above us. The old order still holds. The crossing has not broken." Imagine the festival at night. Torches tremble along the street. Priests move slowly. Robes brush against ankles. The statue is carried with care. People watch from doorways. Some are devout. Some are tired. Some are children who only know that something important is passing and that adults have become quiet. Above them, the real sky remains black and bright. The path of Anu is still overhead. For one procession, absence takes a body. Then the body returns indoors. The sky does not descend. This is the tragedy of late ritual. It is beautiful because it is fragile. A civilization feels its own old language fading, so it speaks the names more carefully. It carries the god with ceremony, perhaps because it can feel that fewer ears will understand the tablets in the centuries to come. The image passes through Uruk like a candle cupped against wind. The source does not claim that Anu finally came to Earth in that procession. It says the opposite. What came was his image, the ritual vessel of his presence. What remained intact was the pattern of distance. The king himself stayed at the crossing point, above the earth, while his authorized form moved below. Again, delegation. Again, descent without full arrival. That is the rhythm of Anu. Authority descends. Kingship descends. Images descend into ritual use. Commands descend through divine hierarchy. Omens descend as readable signs in the sky. But Anu does not descend. The more one says it, the stranger it becomes. At first, it seems like a missing episode. Why is there no tale of Anu walking into Nippur or Uruk? Why no scene of him sitting by a canal? Why no direct conversation with a human king? But after a while, the absence stops feeling like a gap and starts feeling like the design itself. The absent king is not forgotten. He is too high to become ordinary. In the dimness of our room, this can settle gently. We do not have to force a final interpretation. We can let the system breathe. The Sumerians gave us a world where power is layered, where clay mirrors heaven, where numbers carry theology, where the King of Gods remains at the crossing and governs by what flows from him. If there is darkness here, it is the darkness of distance, the loneliness of ultimate authority, the silence of a father whose children fill the world while he remains a name above names. Now, as the fire lowers and the ash glows softly around the wood, we can return to the god lists once more. Those careful tablets, those long columns of divine names. Preserve Anu not as a wandering hero, but as the first position. Father, Great Lord, King of Gods, Lord of pure heaven, He is described by relation, not adventure, by height, not footsteps. The others have stories. Anu has structure, and structure, in the end, may be the deepest story of all. For the next turn of the path, we must ask how to read that structure. As myth, as theology, as philosophy, or as something more literal. A preserved memory in clay of a governing power that ruled from above and operated through those below. The tablets will not let us choose too quickly. They hold the possibilities in silence, like stars waiting for a patient eye. The tablets do not give one answer. They never gather themselves into a tidy sentence and tell us exactly why the highest God stayed away. Ancient clay is rarely that generous. It gives signs. It gives patterns. It gives repetitions across centuries. It gives a temple without a clear body, a sky path, a sacred number, a phrase about kingship descending, a God who grants and authorizes, then remains above. The first way to read Anu is the simplest, and because it is simple, it deserves respect. Anu may be the sky, and the sky does not descend. It covers. It watches. It gives light by day, stars by night, weather in season, omens for those trained to read them. It is always present, yet always out of reach. The Sumerians looked upward and named that vastness as a god. His remoteness, in this reading, is not mysterious at all. It is the nature of the sky. It fits the sign on, sky, heaven, God. It fits the fact that humans everywhere turn upward when speaking of the divine. It fits the old habit of personifying nature, river as God, storm as God, sun as God, sky as God. Anu is distant because the blue above the plain is distant. You can see it every day, but you cannot touch it. It lets the whole mystery become a matter of ancient poetry. The Sumerians did not need Anu to walk through a street because no one expects the sky to wear sandals. His absence is simply the sky being itself. And yet, the source asks us to notice that the texts do not treat Anu merely as a visible sky spread everywhere over human life. They treat him as remote, not intimate, not the ever-present blue above every roof, but a sovereign beyond ordinary access. That distinction is thin, but it glows when held to the light. The second way to read him is more philosophical, though the Sumerian scribes would not have used our later vocabulary. In this reading, Anu is ultimate authority, and ultimate authority cannot descend without ceasing to be ultimate. The highest principle cannot become one actor among others. The base number cannot shrink into a derived number. The source cannot spend itself entirely in the stream. 60 is the whole cycle, the base of the system, the number that contains the movement of time, circle, and measure. Enlil at 50, Enki at 40, Nana at 30, Utu at 20, Inanna at 15. All can be placed within the order. Anu, as 60, is the order from which the scale is read. If he descends into the scale, what happens to the scale? The question is abstract, but it has feeling. Imagine a roof beam holding a house. It cannot come down to sit at the table without the roof changing. Imagine the center point of a circle. It cannot walk around the edge and still be the center. Imagine the silence before a song. It cannot become one note among notes without losing what made the song possible. This reading explains why his word matters more than his body. His command is unalterable. His authority is transferable. Marduk can receive a command like Anu command. Kingship can descend from heaven. The Antu power can pass to others, yet the source remains whole. The third reading is the most speculative, and we must be honest about that. It is not something the tablets prove in the ordinary sense. It is an interpretive possibility raised by the pattern itself. In this reading, the Sumerian texts may preserve a memory of an actual distant authority, a governing power understood to operate from above, outside the human realm, through appointed intermediaries. Here, the Anunnaki become more than literary gods in a family drama. They become the working tier of a hierarchy. Anu remains at the crossing point, and those below him administer the earth. Vantars, cities, kingship, knowledge, and fate. The texts become not a newspaper report, not a technical manual, but a mythological record of a structure that the Sumerians believed was real. The ancient scribes wrote in sacred language, not modern categories. They did not separate myth, astronomy, administration, and theology the way we often do. To read them as literal documentation can be too blunt. It can flatten the poetry and make the old world say things it did not mean to say. But dismissing the possibility too quickly can also be too blunt. The same scribal culture that wrote myths also kept precise astronomical data. The same hands that copied divine names also counted grain, measured fields, tracked omens, and preserved technical lists. They were capable of accuracy. They were capable of system. They knew the difference between one god and another, one star path and another, one legal formula and another. This is where the Anu mystery becomes delicate. The tablets hold all three readings at once: sky personification, theological principle, possible memory of distant governance. None cancels the others completely. They overlap like translucent cloth laid over a lamp. If Anu is sky, his absence is natural. If Anu is ultimate principle, his absence is necessary. If Anu is distant authority, his absence is operational. In all three readings, he does not come down. That is the shared center. Maybe that is why the pattern feels so strong. The answer may change, but the shape remains. Anu stays above, and what descends from him is not his body, but authority. The clay tablets sleep behind glass. The room is quiet, except for the soft movement of air and the occasional footstep of someone who does not yet know what they are passing. A student leans close to a label. A scholar adjusts a light. Somewhere in a storage room, a box holds fragments with numbers assigned by modern catalogers, careful labels that make ancient things findable in modern systems. Clay has entered another bureaucracy. They might smile a little at our accession numbers, our climate control, our gloves, our databases. Another age, Another set of lists. We are still sorting the world so it does not dissolve into forgetfulness. The phrase remains quiet, but it has become the spine of the whole story. Kingship descended, not Anu. Authority came down, not the king. The lower world received power, order, legitimacy, command, and burden. The highest source remained in the sky. A God who descends too fully can overwhelm the world. A source that becomes one event may be trapped by that event. A highest king who enters the lower realm may turn the lower realm into the only realm. By remaining at the crossing, Anu preserves the difference between above and below. And old civilizations cared deeply about order because they lived close to chaos. Rivers flooded. Drought came. Grain failed. Kings died. Walls cracked. Children became sick. Armies appeared on horizons. The difference between ordered life and ruin was not philosophical decoration. It was bread, water, calendar, canal, and law. So perhaps Anu distance gave comfort. Not the comfort of a hand on the shoulder. The comfort of the sky remaining where it should be. The comfort of numbers returning to their cycles. The comfort of stars crossing the same paths. The comfort of knowing that above the noisy gods, above quarrels and floods and wars and city politics, there was a still point from which authority did not fray. Even his silence could be reassuring. If the highest God never comes down, perhaps it is because the highest place has not collapsed. Perhaps absence is the sign that the structure still stands. That is a strange comfort, but an ancient one. The Sumerians lived beneath that distance and built anyway. They built temples. They dug canals. They watched stars. They taught children to write. They pressed divine names into clay. They gave offerings to gods who came closer, and placed above them all a God who did not. Maybe that is the most human part of the whole story. To live beneath an unanswered sky and still make order. To know that the highest king will not walk into your courtyard and still lay bricks, sing hymns, count grain, raise children, and write the name of heaven before every divine name. Because if kingship descends, then the earth can receive shape. If the crossing holds, then the worlds do not fall into confusion. If Anu remains above, then below can remain below, and human hands can do their small work by lamplight. He sits with damp clay before him. A small lamp smokes. The room smells of reed, oil, dust, and river air. Outside, the city grows quiet. Somewhere, a donkey shifts in a courtyard. Somewhere, a priest coughs softly. Somewhere, a child dreams of a lesson he has not finished. A single sign, and with it, heaven, Gott, height, name, distance. His hand moves carefully because the clay is soft and mistakes are annoying, even in ancient times. Maybe he frowns. Maybe he wipes one edge smooth and starts again. There is always one stubborn sign that refuses to behave. Deep time, apparently, did not spare anyone from bad handwriting. Above the roof, the stars follow their paths. The middle road holds. Nibiru, The crossing is somewhere in that ordered darkness. The city sleeps under the rule of gods, kings, walls, ledgers, and dreams. Far above, or perhaps not far in distance, but far in kind, Anu remains where the texts have always placed him, never walking down into dust, yet present in every claim that dust can be ordered. We cannot know which reading is final. The tablets do not force us. They do something better for a night like this. They leave us with a question that is steady enough to rest beside. Why did Anu never come to earth? Anu did not descend because what descended was enough. And in that distance, the oldest written theology on earth found its highest throne. There is one last place where the mystery gathers before it becomes quiet enough to sleep beside. It is not a battlefield, and not a temple court filled with chanting. It is a museum room, almost empty near closing time, where soft lights and glass cases hold little islands of ancient earth. A clay prism rests there, brown and modest, covered in columns of signs, carrying the pride of kings. It looks like an object that might fit in a careful hand. And yet, the words on it reach upward. Kingship descended from heaven. The phrase has followed us like a thin thread through every chamber of this story. It begins above, then comes down into cities, crowns, walls, law, duty, and fear. It gives a king the right to sit higher than other men. It gives a throne a weight that wood and metal cannot explain. It tells the people that rule is not merely seized from the earth, but granted from beyond it. Still, Anu does not descend. That is the strange restraint. The power comes down, the office comes down, the authority comes down, but the source remains at the crossing. The king of the gods does not arrive in a chariot of light. He does not walk into Uruk and place his hand on a human ruler. He does not sit in judgment by a canal while scribes tremble at his feet. He remains above, and below him the whole machine of divine and human order continues. This is why the source keeps returning to delegated sovereignty. A lamp lights another lamp without leaving its place. A seal marks many tablets without becoming clay. A spring feeds channels that feed fields. And a farmer, drinking from the far edge of the canal, may never see the spring at all. Authority in Anu world behaves that way. It flows. It descends. It makes things lawful. It allows others to act. The highest king remains still, and because he remains still, everything else can move. That may be the deepest logic of the Sumerian divine order. Think of Enlil, nearer to earth, stern and storm-filled, the one who commands and enforces. He can be angry. He can decide. He can send the flood in the old stories. His power has weather in it. You can almost feel it on the skin. Wind pressing through reed walls, dust rising, a storm turning the river dark. Think of Enki, lower and deeper, lord of the Apsu, clever, fluid, full of hidden knowledge. He does not always oppose Enlil directly. He bends, whispers, finds a way through. In the flood story, he warns Atrahasis through a reed wall, speaking indirectly because the divine decree forbids open betrayal, even mercy, in that world. uses channels. Think of Inanna, fierce and radiant, close to the pulse of human life. Love, battle, beauty, ambition, descent, return. Her stories move with the urgency of a body in danger and desire. She is not distant. She blazes near. Think of Marduk, in later Babylonian theology, rising through battle, receiving names, taking command, shaping the ordered world from chaos. He becomes active sovereignty, the god who does what the older Sky King does not do. All of them move. Anu measures. It is not that he is weak. The texts do not treat him as weak. They treat him as the height behind strength. His word is a standard. His number is the whole. His name begins the lists. His realm is the sky. His path is the middle crossing. His temple is high and strangely empty. His symbol can be a crown resting on a throne, sovereignty without a visible body. That symbol may be the most honest portrait of him. A crown without a face, a throne without a figure, a presence defined by the space it leaves untouched. If you were standing before such an image in a dim shrine, you might first feel disappointment. Where is the god? Where is the carved beard, the staring eyes, the hands holding rod and ring? Where is the body? But then the emptiness would begin to work on you. The throne is not vacant because no one belongs there. It is vacant because the one who belongs there cannot be contained by the visible seat. A god who appears can be described. A god who remains beyond appearance must be inferred from order itself. That is a colder kind of reverence. It does not offer the comfort of a face, but the comfort of a boundary. Boundaries mattered terribly in the old world. A field boundary kept neighbors from devouring one another with dispute. A canal boundary kept water moving where it was needed. A city wall separated ordered life from wilderness, raiders, flood, and hunger. A temple boundary separated ordinary handling from sacred handling. A cosmic boundary separated sky, earth, and deep water. Nibiru, in the source reading, is the heavenly word for that boundary. The crossing point. The place where movement is recognized and controlled. A ford is not merely a place to cross. It is also the place where crossing is watched. Armies know this. Merchants know this. Shepherds know this. A crossing is a point of vulnerability. Whoever holds the crossing holds the movement between realms. So Anu at the crossing is not simply remote. He is the hauler of passage. Perhaps that is why he does not pass through. The keeper of the gate does not abandon the gate. The balance point does not wander away from the scale. The horizon does not come walking into the field. If it did, the world would lose the very line by which it knows distance. This gives us a gentler way to understand his absence. Maybe Anu never came to earth because the separation between heaven and earth needed a guardian. Maybe the highest god stayed away not from indifference, but because his distance was the architecture of order. Some scholars would keep this within myth and theology, and that is fair. They would say Anu is the sky personified, and the sky is high. They would say the numbers and paths are scribal systems, elegant and meaningful, but not evidence of anything beyond ancient religious imagination. They would say the late statue processions at Uruk show ritual development, not the arrival of a god. That caution is wise. Clay tablets are not invitations to believe every modern dream placed upon them. The old scribes were subtle, and if we listen to them, we should not shout over them. Still, caution can sit beside wonder. The same tablets that preserve myth also preserve mathematics. The same scribal culture that wrote hymns also observed the sky with great patience. The same clay that carries gods also carries grain counts, legal contracts, star lists, and school exercises. Sumerian writing does not divide the world the way a modern shelf does, with religion here, astronomy there, administration somewhere else. In clay, the categories breathe into one another. So perhaps Anu absence is all of these things at once. A sky fact, a theological principle, a political model, a memory of hierarchy, a poetic way of saying that the highest power must remain above the system it authorizes. We do not need to flatten the mystery. Let it stay layered, like a mound, like Nippur itself, where one city lies above another, and under each floor is an older floor, and beneath each wall is an older wall, and beneath the oldest wall, perhaps only compacted earth and the patience of time. You do not understand a mound by scraping everything into one pile. You read it layer by layer. Anu must be read that way. At one layer, he is the sky. At another, he is 60. At another, he is the father of gods. At another, he is the source of kingship. At another, he is the absent owner of the highest temple. At another, he is the one who approaches chaos and withdraws. At another, he is the still point above the Anunnaki, the one whose children and delegates fill the world with action. And at the deepest layer, he is a question the tablets refuse to close. Why does supreme authority so often hide behind distance? That question follows human life quietly. We live inside systems whose sources we rarely see. Laws arrive through offices, money through numbers, orders through seals, weather through invisible pressures, time through clocks that inherit old Sumerian counting. We live under authorities that are most powerful when they do not show their faces too often. The unseen can govern more completely than the visible. Maybe the Sumerians understood that before anyone else wrote it down. Their world was not primitive in the way people sometimes lazily imagine. It was exacting, administrative, poetic, mathematical, and sacred all at once. They built temples out of mud brick, but those temples carried an architecture of thought. They counted in 60s, and the echo still ticks in our watches. They watched the sky and named the paths. They wrote God before divine names with a sign that meant heaven. Then they placed Anu at the top and did not make him come down. That restraint is extraordinary. A lesser imagination might have given him many adventures. The supreme God fighting here, appearing there, embracing kings, burning cities, walking through a garden. But the scribal tradition preserves him mostly as position, source, height, order. He is more difficult than a hero. He is less comforting than a father who visits. More remote than a king one can petition at the gate. He is the sky refusing to become weather. He is authority refusing to become anecdote. He is the throne behind the throne. And yet, the human heart still wanted nearness. That is what the late Uruk procession reveals. When the old world trembled, when foreign rule and changing language pressed around the temples, priests kept, "Hey there, come closer to the fire for a while," because the oldest tablets on earth preserve a strange picture. A king of the gods who ruled everything, gave authority to every throne, marked the sky with his name, and yet never came down to stand on the ground. That is the quiet trouble at the heart of Anu. Every ancient people seems to imagine the highest power arriving sooner or later. A god walks in a garden. A god speaks from a mountain. A god sends thunder over a valley, or fire over a city, or a voice through a prophet near running water. The Supreme One may be distant for a time, but eventually the story brings him close. Not Anu. The Sumerians wrote his name with the sign for sky. They placed him above the gods who shaped cities, dug canals, sent floods, whispered warnings, and walked through human affairs. They gave him the sacred number 60, the number that held the whole system together. They built high temples under the open heavens, counted the star paths, marked a crossing place in the sky called Nibiru, and still, across the tablets, across centuries of clay and kingship, Anu remains above. Honestly, I have always found that absence more unsettling than a dramatic arrival. A god who descends can be seen. A god who never descends becomes a question. Tonight we are not chasing loud fantasy. We are following clay, numbers, old star maps, empty temples, and the strange silence of a throne that seems to rule from beyond the reach of dust. If this kind of slow ancient mystery helps you settle into the night, like the video and subscribe so we can keep walking these old roads together. Now let the room grow dim around you. Let the fire do its small work. No need to force stillness. Just listen and let the first pieces of the old world rise from the dark. Long before paper, long before ink became the ordinary servant of memory, human hands learned to press signs into wet clay. A reed stylus, cut at an angle, met a soft tablet and left behind small, wedge-shaped marks. They look simple from far away, little cuts, little triangles, a field of quiet impressions. But those marks carried grain, debt, prayer, law, kings, stars, and the names of gods farther back than almost any written voice we have. The Sumerians did not begin by writing myths. They began, in the very human way, by keeping accounts. Sheep, barley, oil, workers, jars, fields, deliveries. It is a little funny and a little comforting that the oldest writing on earth often sounds like someone trying not to lose track of storage. Before humanity wrote down the secrets of heaven, it wrote down inventory. Even the ancient world had paperwork waiting on the table. But clay is patient. It did not remain only practical. Over centuries, the same writing system that counted sheep began to hold hymns, school lessons, God lists, lamentation, astronomical omens, and stories of how the universe was governed. What began as a tool for managing grain became a way to map the divine. And at the top of that map sat Anu. His Sumerian name was An. The sign meant sky. It meant heaven. It also became the sign placed before divine names, a marker that said, "This belongs to the world of gods." When the scribe wrote divinity, the hand first wrote the sky. That is not a small detail. It is a whole theology pressed into one sign. To write God was to look upward. Anu was not merely one god among many. He was the height of the system, the father of divine authority, the one whose status gave shape to the hierarchy beneath him. Enlil could command storms and rule the earth. Enki could dwell in the deep, fresh waters and work with cleverness, wisdom, and hidden arts. Inanna could blaze with desire, battle, beauty, and dissent. Marduk could rise in later Babylonian theology and wear names like armor, but Anu remained the summit from which legitimacy flowed. Kingship descended from heaven. That phrase appears in the Sumerian king list, on a clay prism now resting far from the river valleys where it was made. The words are simple. Kingship descended from heaven. Not the king of heaven himself. Kingship. Authority. The right to rule. The invisible weight that makes a throne more than a chair. This matters, because in the surviving record, Anu does not behave like a god eager to enter the story. He is invoked. He is named. He authorizes. His word cannot be altered. His power can be granted to others. But he does not walk into a city, sit with a human, argue by a river, or appear at a doorway with dust on his feet. He is present everywhere by structure. He is absent everywhere by movement. That is the paradox the tablets leave us. To feel it properly, we have to begin not in the sky, but in the earth, in southern Iraq, where mounds rise from flat land like sleeping backs of beasts. Beneath those mounds lie cities built, broken, rebuilt, abandoned, and covered by centuries of wind. One such mound was Nippur, a sacred city whose soil held one of the great archives of the ancient world. In the summer of 1889, John Punnett Peters stood on that mound and looked across a plain so flat it seemed almost outside time. The heat would have been patient and merciless. The land stretched outward in muted colors. Dust, baked earth, low horizon, Baliski. There were no glass cases then, no careful museum labels, no soft lights in reading rooms. Only the mound, the tools, the workers, the uncertainty, and the old city sleeping underneath. Peters was a theologian, not a seasoned field director. He came with ambition, funding, and the hope that the buried world of Mesopotamia might speak. The work was difficult. Water was scarce. Disease moved through the camp. Local tensions pressed around the excavation. The earth did not give up its dead easily, but the digging continued. Season after season, tablets came out of the soil. Not one or two. Not a little handful to place dramatically on a velvet cushion. Tens of thousands of tablets and fragments emerged from Nippur, many of them broken, many worn, many still carrying signs sharp enough to read if one had the patience and training to listen to clay. Imagine one of those tablets being lifted. It is not beautiful in the way jewels are beautiful. It is small, brown, dense, irregular. It looks almost like something the earth might have made by accident. But then you see the rows of marks, each made by a human hand thousands of years ago. A scribe once held it while the clay was damp. A reed pressed. The tablet dried. Empires rose and folded. Languages changed. Cities vanished. And the little object waited. I love that about clay. Paper burns. Memory falters. Stone can be broken, but fired clay can sleep through catastrophe with the stubbornness of a village elder who refuses to leave the doorway. Before the tablets could speak, however, scholars had to learn their language. Cuneiform was not one language. It was a writing system used for many. Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, and others all passed through its wedge-shaped doorway. The decipherment took decades. It was not a clean miracle, but a slow, human labor, full of errors, rivalries, insights, and brave people climbing dangerous cliffs to copy inscriptions. One of the great keys was the Behistun inscription in western Iran, carved high into a cliff by the Persian king Darius I. It preserved the same royal message in three scripts: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. By comparing what could be known with what was still dark, scholars opened one lock, then another. Old Persian helped Babylonian speak. Babylonian helped later readers approach the older Sumerian tradition. Sumerian was especially strange. It did not belong to the same family as Hebrew, Arabic, or Akkadian. It did not fit neatly into familiar patterns. Its grammar moved differently. Its words had no living cousins waiting nearby to help. For a time, some scholars even wondered if Sumerian was not a real spoken language at all, but some kind of priestly code. The tablets settled that doubt with quiet force. School texts, copying exercises, word lists, grammatical lists, and bilingual explanations showed that Sumerian had been learned, taught, spoken, written, and preserved. The scribes themselves left us their classrooms. You can almost see the young student leaning over damp clay, copying signs again and again, while an older teacher mutters corrections. The hand slips. The line is ugly. The master sighs. Somewhere in deep time, a child is bored during writing practice. And because of that boredom, we can now reconstruct a dead language. History has a sense of humor, even when it is covered in dust. Among the most important school tools were lexical lists. The Sumerians loved lists. Plants, animals, stones, tools, stars, cities, profession, goes. They arranged reality into columns, as if the world could be made safer by naming it in order. And among those lists, the god lists are especially important. The greatest of them is known by its opening words, Aniqualsanum, It places the Sumerian name and the Akkadian name of the sky god side by side. The list runs through thousands of divine names in its complete tradition, arranged by rank, family, function, and identity. It is not a casual list. It is a divine census, a map of heaven as an administration. And it begins with Anu. It always begins with Anu. That repeated beginning matters. Across the scribal tradition, across cities and centuries, the highest place belongs to him. The entire divine world is organized from his name downward. Yet once the myths begin to move, once action enters the story, Anu Rechedes, the gods beneath him speak louder. They struggle, desire, descend, build, flood, rescue, and scheme. Anu remains the summit, but not the traveler. That is why his absence is not emptiness. It is structure. A mountain does not need to walk down into the valley to determine the shape of the rivers. A number at the base of a system does not need to appear in every calculation to govern the whole. A king can be unseen and still have every seal stamped in his name. Still, the question remains: why would the oldest written theology place its highest God so far above the story that he almost never enters it? Why build temples to a God who does not arrive? Why assign him the number of totality, the sky sign, the fatherhood of gods, the authority behind kings, and then keep him away from earth? The answer begins in the way the Sumerians imagined the universe itself. Not as empty space, not as a vague above and below, but as a governed order, with realms, jurisdictions, and boundaries. The cosmos, for them, had something like administration. The heavens had paths. The earth had rulers. The deep waters had their lord. Everything belonged somewhere. And Anu belonged to the sky. But not just any sky. The middle road. The crossing road. The place where the stars and planets marked the boundary between above and below. The room is quieter now, so the mind can remember that what rules most deeply may not always be seen. The Sumerians wrote the sky before the god. They placed the king at the crossing. They watched the stars. They counted time in 60s. They built upward. They waited. And the king did not come down. Only kingship descended. Only authority. Only the long shadow of heaven falling softly across clay. Temple, city, river, and dream. Now the question can rest. It has done its work. It has opened the old tablets, lifted the dust, shown us the sky road, and returned us safely to the quiet of this room. The fire is small. The night is deep. The throne remains above. Good night.